Oh, how is everybody today? You've had a good, all here for the whole weekend, or just, oh, wonderful, great, wonderful. I'm sorry, I would have loved to come yesterday, yesterday. But I'm all over, so, and I'm gonna apologize because I do tend to, I have so much to show you, and somebody's gonna have to say, cut. Or we'll be here all afternoon probably, because I'm used to teaching. I'm a former vocational high school teacher, and I'm also a former college teacher and a departmental chair in Maryland, where I actually built a preservation trades program for a 2-year college. So preservation's kind of really in there. My father was in the Air Force, so I grew up all over the world. And most of my childhood was spent in Germany. So I had my 5th birthday party on top of a castle. You know, so I am used to old materials and old things, and I think that's why I just kind of gravitated. I loved glass since I was a little girl, and I was born in Kokomo, Indiana. And if any of you are familiar with Kokomo, Indiana, Kokomo Obsolescent Glass Factory is there. If you ever have a chance to go visit, you need to take the glass tour and go through the factory. That is one of our oldest continuous working stained glass or glass factory in the United States. And they've been around, I think, since late 1800s. I was born not far from there, and my mother told me she used to take me to the factory and walk through the factory when I was a baby. Can't do that anymore, but without taking a tour. But so I kind of, I think, have glass in me. I bleed every day. I bled last night putting all this glass together to show you, and I always tell my daughter, who helps me, if you don't bleed, you're not working. Because this is a profession where you are working with glass and you can't really be afraid of it. I mean, if you're afraid of it, it's going to get you every time. So it's a challenge. And each panel that I work with, I kind of call it my child, because that child is with me, or that panel is with me for 8 weeks sometimes. If I'm working on a church, I'm working on the windows for 2 years, 3 years. So each one is kind of like a child, and I'm very intimate with each one of them. So I can go back into a building and say, I know what I did with that one. I know how I repaired that one, because they are all different. They have different personalities, and they can be cantankerous sometimes too. So, and I'm an artist. You know, I've had art classes all my life, and my brother's an urban planner, and he teaches rendering at Ball State. I mean, we have it in our family. We have really fun discussions when we're all together. Today, I didn't really know how to title this, but I say this all the time. So I changed my PowerPoint. I have multiple PowerPoints for depending on who I talk to. I also do a lot of workshops for 8th graders and school kids, because they love holding the tools, and they are not exposed to a lot of this in their classes anymore. When I was in junior high, I used to take shop class. They don't have that anymore. So, and you guys all probably know that a lot of that is kind of out of the schools, and we're all trying to reintroduce it back. So anyway, I say this a lot. The stained glass is crying. I'm driving down the road, and I'll stop at a church, or stop at a building, or commercial building, or especially a downtown Main Street building, and I see things buckling and things falling out and glass is missing, and it's like, oh, it's crying. It's really crying. It really wants attention. So I do say that a lot. I have cards, and if please take my card if you run across anything later, any questions you want to ask. I'm always available. You can text me. Texting is probably the easiest, and email is the easiest than calling, because I'm in the shop working with lead all day long, and I don't use my phone. At night, I'll text somebody. I'm a person that stays up till 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. I work in my studio's in the same place where I live, so I just go downstairs and go into my studio. So you can text me at midnight. You can text me at 3 a.m. You know, I might be up, may not be, but I'll get back with you right away. If you have a question or you run across something and you want to tell me about it, or you're trying to do something and you need to know the steps, I'm always happy to help people through things. And then get on my webpage, because there it kind of explains and shows some photos of new work I've done, because I am commissioned to do new work, and restoration and repair. I also have a Facebook page, so if you look up RLD Glass Art Restoration, that'll pop up. Like me on there, because I just posted, again, 4 or 5 photos last night of a big project we just installed. And I may not put it on my webpage, so not yet. Feel free to do that. Let me run through this. So I just said this to my daughter, who works with me, the other day, and we were up on scaffold, and something happened, and I said, you know, patience is a virtue. Grandma always used to say that, didn't she? And my daughter said, yeah. And I said, and so is working with glass. And so I put that in here because it is. You have to be patient. And this is not for everybody. This really is not for everybody. I teach classes too in art community centers, and where we start people out with small stained glass sun catchers and things like that. And I'll teach a 2-hour, 3-hour class. It'll be a 2-hour night class, and it'll end up being 4 hours, and I'm not out of there till midnight. That's what happens. And people say to me, you must have patience like Joe. And I'm like, well, not really, but I have more patience with glass than anything else, I think. So it's just, I talk to it as I'm working, and it's just, I just do. And what you'll see through this PowerPoint, this is an example. I'll have pictures in the background. All of these are things I have done, okay, have worked on, and you'll be able to see some damage. You'll be able to see some new pieces. And you can see in this particular one, I'm going to grab my laser. This particular one, if the laser works, can't really see it. But right down here, that was duct tape. That was on that, you know, no duct tape, please. You know, and believe me, this whole window had a lot of duct tape on it. And then you can also see that it's pretty dark, even though it's a black and white photo. Then the dark areas, that's soot. And if you're familiar with removing even wood window sash, you're black at the end of the day. And I'm black at the end of the day when we're removing windows like this too. So I'll point out these kinds of things as we go along. I'm not going to get into the history of stained glass, because if I did that, we would be here all day. And you can look that up on the website. And matter of fact, I have some, and I know books are old school, but I still read books. I have some books here that are really good if you want to look into the history of glass. And also, this is a conservation of stained glass. This is kind of like my Bible. I do have an appraisal guide, and I refer to that once in a while. The Stained Glass Association of America, who, it's an organization I belong to, they put out something like this called the Story of Stained Glass. This is a really good history piece, so if you're interested in the background of glass. And then they also put out guidelines. Most of you are probably familiar with standards and guidelines of historic preservation. They put out a standards and guidelines for stained glass. And, you you know, it's good. I follow them as much as I possibly can. Some instances I can't. I have to introduce a new material. But it's because I also know about that material and I know that it's time tested. So I'm really picky about things. I'm a more of a purist in preservation. So I don't like to introduce a lot of new things. I'm still using the old school ways, and I'm an artist. So, and I was a drafter, and I was an architectural drafter for years too. So I'm still using the drafting table to draw on. I don't use CAD. I don't use the computer as much. I still hand draw my things. So I've got these up here too that you can look at. So we won't even go into that, but I will just kind of talk real quick about glass, colored glass. We really call it sheet glass or art glass, not so much stained glass. Stained glass is a different type of glass, and I'm going to go through types with you in a minute. But because it becomes such a universal term, even I say it too. If I were to correct a client who's calling me all the time, they wouldn't understand what I'm talking about. So I'll just use stained glass just like they use stained glass when they say, I have a stained glass window that needs to be repaired. I'm like, okay. They'll call me, and it might be this. So this is what they think is stained glass. But that's actually called leaded glass. And it may not even be lead. This is zinc. It's not lead. So in most cases, this is just a divided light to me that's channeled with zinc. So sometimes over the phone, it's kind of hard because this is not a stained glass window. So in fact, we call these leaded quarries, especially the diamond pane ones. But glass is made out of limestone, sand, soda ash, and metal oxides. The metal oxides over here, I just found this on the web, and it talks about, you know, copper makes this color, and iron makes this color, and that's what they put in the kiln in the hot molten glass when they're making the glass. Kokomo Glass has a really good YouTube channel that has a tour on it that actually shows how they make the glass in these big, huge beehive kilns. And so if you want to know a little bit more about the chemistry of that, that's a really good one. And some of the other ones are doing the same thing. Some of the other companies are coming out with videos now on how they're making the glass and how they're coloring the glass. So this is what we have. We have art or sheet glass, and that's how we terminology when we're in the field. It's sheet glass. When I'm calling to order it, it's not stained glass, it's sheet glass. There's different types of glass. There's cathedral glass, opalescent glass, antique, sheet antique, and machine rolled. Okay? So your cathedral glass is glass that looks like this. You can see through it. And this happens to be a color, one color. And I can show you, this is another color. There's probably over 2,000 colors now in glass that are made. And I'm going to pass these around so you can see them as we go through here. That's cathedral glass. Okay? This is a sample box or a partial sample box. Any stained glass person has to purchase the sample boxes if you're going to look at glass to order. This company is Wismach, one of the companies that I work with. It's just a partial box. Actually, I have a whole bunch more at home. I bring this to all my demos because I lose glass a lot. so I bring this one only. But you can see, there's all kinds of cathedral glass, all kinds of colors. Okay, so we work with that. Opalescent glass is glass that's made with streaks of white, and it's interjected in the kiln as the hot molten glass as they're making it. So this is an example of cathedral glass or opalescent glass or opalescent glass. Everybody has a different way to pronounce it. Here's some more opalescent glass. Okay? Now, every company also has different densities to that opalescent glass. So sometimes it's really dense, and sometimes it's not too dense. Let me see if I don't know if I've got one here. I think most of them are pretty dense that I pulled. I just pulled these out. Oh, here's one. See? That's opalescent glass too. But this one's called streaky. So everybody has different names for them. Okay? So that you might find interjected in a panel too. Antique glass is blown glass. Now, blown glass is typically blown through a tube. I mean, if we were to look at what happened back in the day when even window glass was made, it's blown in a tube to a cylinder, and that cylinder was actually swung and to make it really long, and then it was cut and annealed on a table, and that's what makes the striations of the glass. I do have a couple of pieces of old blown glass that you can kind of see that. So I'm going to pass this around. By the way, this is kind of like gold to me, and I cry when I see people throwing it in the trash because old wavy glass is hard to come by. You can buy it new. You can buy new old wavy glass, but it's not the same as old wavy glass. And the problem that I see is that you've got most of the older windows are small divided lights. But when I get to a point where somebody has like a 1/1 or a 2/2, and I got a contractor calling me because he thinks I stockpile glass, which I do, but and I say, no, I don't have big pieces. I just can't find the big pieces. I got a lot of little pieces, but not big pieces. So if you see big pieces being thrown, pick them up. Really, honestly. So it's really kind of, so look at this, and you can see in the light. I also look at glass this way. I tilt it, and then I can see whether it's kind of gives it a wave or not, and that gives you an idea that it's wavy glass.
Is that glass intended to be decorative, or it just happens to have that because
Just happens to have it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
is that?
But now they make it to be decorative, and you can actually put that in now. Yeah.
So it's blown, but how did you say they make it flat?
They cut it and when it's hot, and then they anneal it. It rests actually. That was the way it was done. Now it's sheet rolled. So and I'll show you that in a second here. Let me see. Now it's what we call. See, this is the way it was done. Do you see that? How this guy's blowing it, and they had these long troughs. They would put, and this is a photograph that I got out of Intro to Stained Glass. And they put them on probably metal tables or wood tables probably, and then cut down the center, and then they let that rest. And then it's annealed slowly. Now, that's how it's made. That's a shot from right out of Kokomo Glass's website. And the guys come out with the ladles out from the kiln, and they, put it on the stainless steel table, and then it's rolled through metal rollers that actually flatten it out. And some of those rollers have a texture. That's the other thing. So when I'm working with students, they go, "Oh, you mean I have to think about the color? Then I got to think about what kind of glass I want, and then I got to think about the grain of the glass, just like a piece of fabric. And then now I have to think about the texture too when I'm designing a new piece. And I'm like, yep, those are all the things. And I pay really close attention to texture because texture sometimes dictates dates when that was made and where it was made. I've done glass in Baltimore. I've done glass in in Pennsylvania, I've done glass in Michigan, Tennessee. I can tell you geographic locations, what type of texture I can find in that area. And you know, just based upon that area. So there were factories all over the United States at one time, and they just aren't there anymore. And they made specific textures, and then they competed with each other on those textures. So let's say Pittsburgh Glass says, oh, I got a new, you know, we got a new roller out, and this is what it's gonna make, and you're gonna love this glass. And then you've got Kokomo going, yeah, but we have all of our textures we've had since 1886, you know. That's what you want. So I really believe that's what it was, because I'm a real stickler about if I have to replace glass, that I try to find the texture and the color to match as best as possible. And I'll go across the United States to find it. I went all the way down to Black Dog Salvage one time and picked up one stained glass window for a Louisville job because I couldn't find the texture, and I found it in the glass they put on their site. And you know, it was I think I paid $125 for this window that was falling apart. There was very little glass left to it, and an overnight stay and gas and all that. But boy, did it look good when I put it in. And you know, I want it to be that way. You know, that's part of who I am. So so you got textures now, and those rollers make that. So a lot of times you'll have the rollers smooth on the top or the bottom, and then the textured roller is on one side. And of course, when you're cutting glass, you cut glass on the smooth side, not on the textured side, because your cutter would be, you know, doing this. So that makes it. Now this glass is pretty heavy. This is actually a piece of Kokomo glass. They make it 1/4 inch too. Most glass is 1/8 inch. I say I can get a fat 1/8 inch and I can get a thin 1/8 inch. It depends, because glass is rolled. So if it's rolled now, you know you're not going to get consistency across the board. There's only a few glass companies. Bullseye Glass is really good about consistency, but they're making fusible glass or for hot glass for projects, not so much for what we do. So okay, so now here are all the different, I just kind of threw down the different types, because that way you can kind of see what I'm talking about here. So stained glass is true glass that has been stained with, and I'll pass this out, silver stain. Okay, this has got silver nitrate in it. This is a vitreous glass paint. This is what we use to stain glass with. This is what was used back in the medieval days. This was used in Germany when I went through all the cathedrals, all the old German Gothic, Italian, French cathedrals with stained glass windows. You will not find a lot of colored glass in. You will find probably clear glass with black tracing and stained areas that are bright yellow or orange. And that's because the intensities, we can get this paint in a lot of different intensities. Now this little jar is $50, but you know, you just use a little bit and then it's fired in the kiln up to a specific degree, and it permanently stains that glass all the way through. Okay? And like I said, I can do double coats. I have different types of silver stain, different colors that make oranges, yellows. You can silver stain blue glass or light blue glass, and it makes it green. I mean, there's a lot of different things you can do. So if you walk around and you go to the oldest, and I'm talking the oldest, like I've been in 1850s, I've been in 1840s churches, you will see, you don't see a lot of colored glass. It's painted glass. And if you see color, it's stained, okay? That's a whole different process. What would be fun to do, and I wouldn't want kids to work with this, but what would be fun to do is stain a lot of different colors of glass and then see what colors you come up with. I don't have time to do that, but it would be really neat to do that. But that is stained glass. So I'm going to pass you just a really, this is a piece, just a real example piece I did to show. You see that yellow right in there? That's stained. That is using silver stain. It's a different firing process. This yellow in this one, that's silver stain. Okay? So the painted windows, which I have next, you are painting with a black vitreous paint. It's called a tracery paint, and we've got a lot of different colors of this too. I mean, dark black, black brown, intense black, and it's mixed with a medium, and you paint it on the glass, and then you fire it in the kiln. And then your silver stain is fired as another layer, and that stains the part that you want to have stained. Okay? So these are just example pieces, and you can look at these, and when you pass them around, you're going to feel the paint on the painted side and the smooth side. The smooth side goes outside. You never want to put a painted piece turned towards the outside of the building because it won't last. All the painted pieces are facing you into, and then I think I have a piece of glass here. And I'm going to go to paint it quickly because then that's, you have stained glass and you have painted glass. Now this is a piece that I painted not too long ago for a client that wanted to look at some roses. She wanted roses in her, and actually I'm doing this for a church medallion, but I do a lot of test things. Before we get to the design that they like, I'm testing, I'm doing a lot of painted pieces before we get to that. But this is a painted piece, okay? And this is an old historic painted piece that comes out of one of my salvage windows. So I'm just gonna pass that around so you can kind of look at it. Now, somebody's painted this on colored glass, so that tells me, it kind of gives me an idea of, it could be 1960s, could be, you're kind of looking at time periods at that time. This is called stenciled glass. Now, late after the 1900s, people wanted color in their glass, but they couldn't afford it. Most of the glass up until that point was imported from Europe. We had Kokomo glass going, and we had some glass companies out in New York starting up in the 1860s, and that was probably the newest, and then later 1880s in Kokomo. But up until that time, we didn't have glass factories in the United States, and people were importing, and only the wealthy was importing. Okay, so after the turn of the century, people were like, well, I want color. So what they were doing is stenciling glass to kind of give it a pattern. This was actually less expensive. Now, do you imagine how much it is? I do this, and I want to shoot myself every time I do a project because I have to make the stencil by hand, and then I paint it by hand. Now it's more expensive, but it was less expensive because they had stencils that were made out of brass. Some were copper. I'd like to know where they all are. I think people melted them down through the years, didn't know where they, what they were. But boy, I go to a lot of auctions, and I go to a lot of flea markets, and I go to a lot of garage sales, and I still haven't found them. And the guys that I talk to that are pickers are telling me that they have run across these stencils, but people like to hang them on their wall. And I'm like, I want them, because that would make my job easier. I wouldn't have to cut out a stencil to this pattern by hand. So, but yes, they were like a brass or a copper, and it was painted over top of that, and then fired in the kiln, of course. So you can pass these around to everybody, and then pass this around. You can see, this is out of a window I've got actually there. And the one thing I forgot to add to my list is called flash glass. Flash glass, and I want everybody to look at this. look up in the light, you're gonna see clear glass. And you're gonna see, this is color, right? Red. I can get red and blue. This is about $50 to $75 a foot now. And not everybody can get it. And last time I tried to get it, I had to order from overseas. My client's not gonna pay that. Nobody, I'm not even gonna pay that. So I stockpile as much flash glass as I can. So now I'm in the process of trying to make glass to match the flash glass, to try to make the color, because I can't get this really deep red. And then look at this on the back side of this. This came out of what's called a Queen Anne window. Have you ever seen windows that are kind of divided lights? They got little squares all the way around, and they've got colored squares, and in the center it might be clear glass. That's called a Queen Anne window. And I have salvaged a lot of these out of windows that people have thrown away in different sizes. And this one, look at what's happened to the back side of that glass. What do you think that's from? It could be sandblasting brick. Somebody out there sandblasting a brick. Yes, I get that a lot. Some of this is from air pollution. There's a lot of pitted glass across the United States from old coal factories that have actually, the air pollution has pitted the glass. But I do find a lot of glass that's been sandblasted because somebody's out there blasting brick and taking the paint off, and they're not covering the windows. So this is really kind of gold for me, and I stockpile it all in case I have to do repairs. And really, you can only get red or blue. Now, what it was intended for, and I know you've probably seen this when you've walked through some museum properties. There's very few homes. I mean, I see it once in a while in transoms. It was intended to engrave in, so that when you engrave through the color, you get the clear on the back side, so the pattern, it shows. Or even sandblast if you have a really thick piece. But most of the time this was for engraving and etching. So look at that and you'll see the clear. It's acid etching, yes. Or engraving with tools.
Can't find hydrofluoric acid anymore, can you?
Well, I get my acid from HIS Glassworks down in South Carolina or North Carolina, and it works really well. It's I dip my glass in it to etch the whole piece when I have to etch the piece, but I can use it with a stencil.
You still ship it out?
And they still ship it.
Beeswax?
Yeah, they still ship it, yeah. It's not good to have around a lot, but
Dangerous to inhale too.
yeah. Now this is a stencil pattern. This was a tester that I did, and I actually made the stencil by hand and painted it by hand. Just finished this job in Ripley, Ohio. Ripley United Methodist Church has just divided lights with this is one of their stencil panels, patterns. So you can see, I'll pass that around. And then these are just, I make a lot of these little tiny things that will go into either church windows or Gothic windows, where if I have to make a sample for a client, I make a second sample for my drawer so I can pass it around. And that's what these are. Here I had to do a nameplate. I had to do a plate across the bottom of a panel. So I made this on just plain, this is just scrap glass I have and fired it. So, and I make those stencils myself and paint it myself. So you can pass that around. Lead cores, we kind of talked about that. Lead windows. This is actually these are zinc. And this is what we kind of call lead core. You can see how malleable this lead is, right? That's malleable. Zinc doesn't move like that. And I'm going to pass around some zinc and lead samples so you can kind of get an idea. So when I get a piece like this, and you know, this is again a salvage piece, but I work on a lot of transoms for people. If they have a zinc transom, channeled transom like this one, and they have a piece that's out like this, I have to take that whole piece out and take it back to the studio. I cannot replace that one little piece of glass in situ. Because zinc is hard, and I've got to get in there with a Dremel. And in order to repair this, I've got to cut all the way up to it, and then insert that piece, and then build it back. Okay, so it's not as easy as it sounds in a lot of cases. Yeah.
So that's zinc, you said?
This is zinc, yeah. And you can tell it, you can take a key, and you know, you can go down through on a window. Don't scratch a window, but you know, if you need to do a little tester part, you can tell. And I will pass them out so you can see what zinc is versus lead.
When did they start, or, I mean, how far back?
Turn of
is-
the century.
Okay.
Actually, Frank Lloyd Wright, if you're familiar with Frank Lloyd Wright, Mr. Wright, he decided that, you know, his windows are called, you know, like divided lights and in art, you know, and he didn't want any window treatments on his windows. So he designed his windows with very long and narrow pieces of glass. In the arts and crafts style, that's what we see in the prairie style. Well, to hold those together, he actually went to Chicago Metal, it's a Chicago Metal factory, Metallica, and asked them to design a channel that would hold his glass. And that's kind of where, so some of his glass, late 1800s I've seen zinc, but most of the time it's after 1900. And you see it all the way into the 50s and the 60s. Because I had a 1955 house that was a stone house in Maryland, and it had zinc divided like windows. So anyways, it's not as easy to get to and repair, but it still can be repaired.
But is it safe to say that the zinc windows are sturdier?
I think they thought that, but I had more problems with pitted zinc. I mean, most of the zinc windows that I have to repair, the zinc is pitted. I mean, majorly pitted on the exterior side. And what happens is it deteriorates then, and then the joints crack. And most zinc windows, all the joints are, I mean, you gotta go in and repair the joints. And it's not easy to solder zinc. I mean, I have developed how to do it through time. But I have a whole metal tool, you know, that I've had to kind of, you know, I sometimes feel like, God, I didn't want to be a, you know, blacksmith. But I have to, you know, grind, and I've got, you know, I've got metal saws and metal band saws, and I've got all kinds of things just for my metal, because I'm working with zinc and copper. But this is an example. This, I just pulled this out of the sachet at home. There's a cracked joint right there. And see, what happens is that when it starts cracking, then it's gonna pull away from that sash, and then you're gonna get this. And then once you get that, then the material that's underneath your zinc, which I call putty, it's brittle and it starts falling out, and now your pane of glass is going to, you know, you hear it in the wind. And some rain. I had this woman call me, she texted me a video, showed me inside of her building. This video camming the stained glass, and the water was coming right through the channels and coming down onto her floor. She said, "Is something wrong here?" And I'm like, "Yeah." You don't have any putty underneath the channel there. So this putty that's put underneath there at the end of when you create a window is what makes it waterproof, and you have to do it front and back. But it also is what gets brittle over time. And I'm talking 75 years, 100 years, 150 years. You know, I worked on some windows from a cathedral in Germany that were from, I think, the 15 or 1600s. And they still had some putty in them. And I was just like amazed. But then I use some of those old recipes. That's how I make mine. So, I don't have any added ingredients, like new, artificial or plastic ingredients in mine. But, yeah, so, whereas you can see this one is lead, easy to get to. And if this wasn't as bad as this is really bad. Again, it's a salvage window somebody threw out on the curb. And I can repair it. So it can be repaired. And many times I'll go, it'll be transoms, it'll be side lights, somebody will call, and it will be lead, and they'll just have one piece out. And sometimes I can actually put a new piece in without removing that window. I can do it in situ. It makes it a little bit harder if the lead is thinner, because I gotta try to get that glass in and make it hold so it doesn't fall out again. And I always have to make it just a tad bit smaller to get in there.
Question. So, did you say, lead, does it require putty too?
Oh yeah, yeah. Yep.
So ultimately, regardless, I know you just said like it should last possibly 50, 100 years. Should just zinc never be used for like a window exterior?
No, I mean, typically, if it's zinc, I replace it back with zinc, because I'm trying to be historic. But most of the time I have to replace it all because it's so pitted. We tend to use zinc more as the perimeter. If it is something that's free-hung or something that is going to fit into that opening, you don't have to do any kind of finagling to it. All historic houses are not square, so all windows are not square. So sometimes it'll fit in, sometimes it won't. Sometimes you'll have a metal sash window that is zinc only. And I will, kind of going down here, but that's fine. I will tell you, this is one of them, your prism tile pieces, panels that are, I know you've walked down Main Street and you see, the prism tiles above the Main Street buildings. I restore those too. And these were intended on bringing light. It was kind of like the first part of solar energy. It was to bring light into the first floor of the Main Street business. And in the 1960s, everybody covered them over. Let's put some stuff over them. Let's paint them black. And I'm saying that because I may be getting a job where I think we have 25 of these up in Indiana where they painted them all black. And we're going to have to start with stripping all the paint off first before. I've seen people paint the prism parts. And I'd like to hang them by the barn, timber. But, and that's not fun. But the prisms on the back side, this would be on the interior of your building, is what that light hits that, and then it shoots it, the sunlight shoots it into the building, hence warms it up. So, uncover these. These are beautiful. And they were made by a lot of different companies in the time period. So 1899, I restored one down in Frankfurt that was a 15-foot long transom above this Main Street building, and it had its nameplate. A lot of times they had the nameplates. The problem is people steal them and they sell them online. So you have troubles trying to find them back, and they're worth a lot of money. And this particular project had each panel, and they're all in panels, had their nameplates. So of course I put them back. But I'm going to pass this around because this is an example where your a prism tile window or panel is all going to be in zinc because that was sturdier. These are really heavy, and they're innately heavy because they're usually about 30 inches high by, could be, I've repaired them when they're 5 feet long, 6 feet long. I don't like doing it any more than that because this panel's heavy by the time you get the putty in there. And then they were inserted in a channel, and a lot of times those were copper channels. buildings. So I've had to have metal people come out, or blacksmiths, or put new copper pieces in for me sometimes because they're damaged. And then I'm gonna pass around to you the new zinc that I use when I'm restoring these, because inevitably, you will see when you look at this, I just took this out of one because you will see how pitted this zinc is. So the newer zincs, I think, are a little bit better. I can't say that much about the newer leads. I like the old lead. It seems like not in all cases, but in a lot of cases, it's a lot more durable than some of the newer ones out there now. Yeah.
So back to the putty for a second. Did you say if your glass is in good shape, but it's just loose, can you re-putty?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what all these dental tools are for. So all the old putty is picked out of there, and then we thumb apply, if we're doing it in situ, re-putty. Now, I'm gonna say that's the way I do things. A lot of the bigger firms will remove all the glass and they will re-lead everything, in a lot of cases. I find, like I said, that a lot of lead is in good condition. So if it's in good condition, I can scrub it pretty well, and we can re-putty. If we've got it on the table, and I'll show you pictures, we do that then. Let me pass around some more prism tiles so you can get an idea. This one's called a torch, and then there's the reeded designs, and oh, I thought I had. This is actually called Luxfer tile. Luxfer is a name brand, so I call them prism tiles because many companies made. Solar Prism made, Luxfer Prism tile, many companies. Pittsburgh Glass even made. And you'll see that a couple of these kind of have a lavender appearance. That's the manganese in the glass. And the UV light affects it and creates that lavender appearance. And I've had people that have told me they've ripped out these because they didn't like the color. They wanted them clear. Because when you look down on Main Street building, some are really deep lavender, some are light lavender, some are still clear, and there's people that want consistency. But whatever.
Make images closer
You
to
keep
the
saying
cell.
made,
Right,
which
exactly.
scares me a little bit. What is the manufacturing sort of situation now for that kind
I
of
think
glass?
it's gorgeous.
Can't find, not made anymore. These are not made anymore. So what do I have to do? I have to try,
Right.
hold on to as much as I can. And I will buy panels at auctions and take them apart and have these. Because the zinc is pitted and the zinc is crap most of the time. Or they're all falling apart. But somebody has taken them out of Main Street buildings. And then otherwise, eBay is or high-end antique shops, and they'll sell these for $10 a piece, and some of the nameplates and some of the logos will be $25, $35, $45.
That's an individual 4x4.
Yeah.
This is cut out.
And that's, yeah,
And if you notice,
you can see how they use that as an example. They use this to replace something like that.
on that one that's broken there, at the very bottom,
There's a
embossed
number, there's a number.
or a
at the-
letter.
Right, or a letter, and when you're working on specific sheets or specific panels, you'll tell, just like a piece of wallpaper, if you've ever hung wallpaper and you buy a roll of wallpaper and then 2 weeks later you want to buy another roll of wallpaper to match your wallpaper, you probably won't find them that they will match. What they did with this is they embossed a number, and every company has their own kind of
If one's
signature.
turned upside down,
Yes, you'll know it.
You'll pick it out.
You'll pick it up. You'll pick it up. Yep. So if you look at, let me see, I have a couple of these. Oh, I thought I had. This is, I think, this is a pin dot. I'm not sure. And then there's Dewdrop, which has little But you'll see a little tiny, some have XX or X or, and you wanna make sure when you're rebuilding these that those are all the same. You know, you want your prisms to be a certain way. But it's interesting because I took one apart that turned gold, and I had never had that happen.
And if you,
I mean, the glass was gold. It wasn't purple lavender.
there were like 55 different patterns to these that, depending on what elevation the building you were on and how deep your store was, it would take the light either shallow into the store
Into the
deep.
store or deep.
And then once electricity came about, they didn't need these, so
Right.
they painted it.
Yeah. So the question that you asked about, what do you replace them with? A lot of times I have to use this, which is a 1/4 inch or quarter bead, or, you know, we call it, reeded glass. And there's an, you know, 1/4 reed, an inch reed, 1/8 reed, a 32. I mean, I've had to try to match sometimes. But then again, you also have, I've worked on commercial buildings where I needed to replace a prism, kind of, but it's reeded glass. That's a big sheet. And sometimes it's really hard to get the really thin reeded glass. So sometimes we have to do this. And I have a piece of the real old reeded glass here. I can pass out. Here's a piece. So I stockpiled this too. And there's a lot of factory buildings and warehouse buildings that are being either torn down or the windows are replaced with replacement windows. And the big factory windows are metal sash, and they have this reeded glass in, and they just, you know, but I grab the glass whenever I can, because I can reuse this to restore somebody else's and to repair somebody else's. And, you know, a lot of glass people that I work, well, I shouldn't say a lot, but there's a couple of comments that have been made to me by some people that just, you know, replace glass all the time. I'm talking shower doors or just windows, and they'll say to me, well, this is junk. We've thrown it away for years, you know. Nobody wants that bathroom glass. Well, I want it because I have to repair, and I can't find it. So I do stockpile.
What is it, industrials?
Yeah, yeah. So, anyway, okay, so then you've got cast glass, etched glass, sandblasted glass, and I'm gonna kind of pass around, this just comes out of a lamp. And, you know, sometimes you'll see it's been sandblasted and cast, and you have bevels. Most of you have seen the bevels. This is an old bevel. Newer bevels, the profiles are not as high, okay? And most of the newer bevels either come from China, so you have the thinner glass, or sometimes they come from Germany. But, so they're much thinner in profile. So when you're restoring a beveled glass door, for instance, like I do a lot of those, I have to, I work with a custom beveler out of Indianapolis who actually is an artist and a sculptor, and he makes all my bevels custom to the exact design that I need. And the first question he always asks me is, what's the profile, what's the height? Because he tries to match the glass for me so that, you know, the height is there. So,
Does he make the new bevels out of like tempered?
no,
So it's the real
I
deal?
don't want tempered glass. Yeah, it's the real deal.
Look at the color of the
And
glasses.
look at the color as you're,
Because different,
Yep.
You can tell the age of the glass by the color.
and you also want to make sure that when you're restoring or repairing, that your bevels are the same color, because you'll be able to tell that. I mean, you're gonna look at that window, and if you put a new piece in there that doesn't have this tint to it, you'll see, at least I do. I mean, it stands out like a sore thumb to me. So this gives you an idea of a stock bevel and a old bevel. And then, you know, you can get globs, bevels. These are globs. A friend of mine did this, you know, he does hot glass. I make my own globs in the kiln. I can pass out some of these. Old bevels sometimes could be bevels that are beveled on both sides. So, you know, I actually keep all of those if I have to. And most of this is, and then now you can get, of course you can get jewels, and a lot of your Victorian windows will have jewels like this. And you'll see these are globs in here, and then this has bevels, but a lot of times you'll see jewels. And the jewels aren't the same. The older the jewel, the height is different as well. So what I did here is I put in a bag jewels that I needed to replace some jewels on this old Victorian panel. Jewels that I needed to order to try to match the old jewel. I want you to take that out so you can see the height is a lot different than what's available today. So then that means I have to, you know, I'm constantly, I'm like Knight Rider. I'm, you know, trying to find anything that I can find that people have put in their garage, in their basements. Somebody passed away, you know, stained glass place has gone out of business and has been there for 80 years. Boy, I'm there. I'm trying to be there. So, because if I need something like this and I want to repair that glass properly, I'm going to try to put in exactly what I can, you know, what matches. Architectural glass, I'm sure you're all familiar with glass that you can get, you know, in patterns. So, I mean, we could go on and on and on. There's all kinds of clear glass out there. I don't see a lot of this in restoration. And quite frankly, 98% of what I do is restoration and repair. I do new commissions once in a while, but most of the time it's all restoration. And you might see in old glass even glue chip. Okay, and there's different types of glue chip. This is made with high glue, and there's what we call single chip. Looks like frosted glass, or that Jack Frost hit it, or double chip, and there's lots of different styles to that. So to match that, sometimes I have to just buy different sheets, and I have in my glass room lots of different kinds of glue chips so I can match it. And then the other thing you might see is this is called German New Antique, and it's got a little bit of a line to it. Sometimes I run across 1890s windows that had the old antique glass that kind of looks like this. This company's making it all different colors though now. So pass around that. You can look at that. And then you might even see what's called ripple glass. A lot of Victorian homes have ripple glass. A lot of 1890s churches have ripple glass. In fact, this is an old piece of ripple glass that came out of a Louisville job. And Kokomo is making now a tight ripple. It's funny, when they came out with this, I called them, I'm like, I don't want the tight ripple. Everything I've used is the wide ripple. And they're like, well, we're doing tight ripple now. So now, you know, you have to call them and say, hey, I'm out there and I'm trying to restore these pieces. And if I need a new piece of glass and I can't find it in the historic vintage glass I have, I need to buy it anew. So they need to be making it. And so now they're making a lot of different kinds of ripple. So this is a tight ripple. And I'm running across, actually I just bought 2 pieces of glass yesterday that I'm going to, it's a double hung sash window that I'm going to be making into a transom for somebody in Indiana for their Italian style house. And it has the tight ripple in it. So I'll pass this out.
we've reached our time.
Ugh, I wanna go through this really fast, gonna go through this really fast. So this is an example of stained glass, and you can see the halo around Jesus' head that's done in stain, okay? And this was a job where I cleaned the glass. Just cleaned it sensitively. If you're familiar with Urban Artifact Brewery outside in Cincinnati on the north side, go there. I did the huge rose window. We restored the rose window, and we also restored the painted window above the two front doors. This also has silver stain in it. You can see the orange in some of those pieces. And the rest of it, I had to hand paint to replace the glass. This was one that had been damaged and had duct tape all over this one too. Maybe, Christopher. Okay, and I passed around a sample of the glass that I'm actually working on Ripley and Ohio, and I'm doing all of these now. I had to replace 8 of them, so I have painstakingly painted 8 of those, and they're pretty big, 25 by 25 inches long. And we talked about lead glass. I repair a lot of these. And beveled glass. Now, this is an example of 2 new ones down in Madison, Indiana. Madison also has a historic district, and you need to abide by those rules and guidelines. So both of these were put into Italianate style houses. And I went to the board with my patterns on them. They're brand new. But what I did was, this is called the bevel cluster, and I tried to match it to their iron gates that went around the house. So they were both approved, and we put them in. But they're very indicative of the design of that particular house. And this one has jewels, this one has cast pieces. And those cast pieces are small, little, tiny jewels that have little designs. And then we also talked about this. This is the job I referred to in Frankfurt. This is the finished job. This is what I encountered before I went there. A lot of bowing and buckling. In fact, they had 2x4s holding up the windows from falling down onto the sidewalk. So, I didn't even get to the common tools, Christopher. If you want to come up and look at all the tools, we can just do it that way. But tools, I'll tell you, when I teach people in small classes, I say to them, don't go out and buy all these tools, because you're buying a grinder, and you see a grinder over here, and I have multiple grinders. I have multiple bandsaws. I have scroll saws that cut glass if I need them. All this equipment's a lot of money. So unless you're really dedicated, if you're not, just go take a class at an art center and support them and do glass, once in a while, or because these are expensive. Your soldering irons are $100 or more, and if we're using them all the time, about every couple of years, you have to replace them. And then I buy lots of little tools. I love to go to flea markets and find things. This is an oyster knife, and I can use this. And I use a lot of grapefruit knives for tools. And this is nobody touches this one. This is my go-to knife that I use. When I first bought it from this guy at a flea market, this was sharp on this side, and I went in and went like that, and I just sliced my fingers for the longest time. I'm like, Rhonda, you stupid. So I only hone this side now, but it's a double-bladed knife. So I make my own tools out of all kinds of woods. I need skewers and wood, different things to pull things with. And and a lot of dental tools. So when I go to the dentist, I say, yeah, I know you're putting 2-part epoxy in my tooth and you're doing this and that. And they're like, how do you know all this? I said, because it's the same thing. It's the same process I'm working with glass. I use a lot of the same kind of tools. So what I did was put together a list of all the different kinds of glass companies that I have to work with. And you can go out online and look for those. Call me if you have to buy glass. I might have it. If you need vintage pieces, I probably have it. I have a lot of people that call me and say, I've got a piece of red that looks like this. I'm like, yeah, probably have it. And I put in the window construction. This is what most people ask me about. And I think a couple of you have alluded to this. Cracked glass, missing glass, broken glass, glass that's falling out. Even if it isn't falling out, I can go to and if I can see the sky through your stained glass window, then you've got holes coming through the putty. I mean, this part here then is already brittle and falling out. And you can see this one is buckled. Now I bought this at an auction because I have a client that wants it for her transom. But you can see that this is buckled. And this one is painted black. For some reason they didn't like the blue, so they painted it black. So, and this is painted too. Actually, it's painted brown. I repaired a window that was actually repaired with fingernail polish. And we start, we use vinegar, we use distilled water. I don't use any chemicals when we're cleaning. And my daughter was saying, Mom, this thing is turning red. I mean, we were square, and it was all turning red. I couldn't figure out what was going on. And it was fingernail polish that they had put under places. So I've encountered a lot of different things with people. Caulk, silicone caulk, people taking caulk on their thumb and caulking all the cracks in churches, where I've had, silicone will crack the glass even more in temperature. Because what it does is it holds that glass, and then the temperature differences, it just shatters it when I have to take it apart.
Buckling on the window, is that just a product of time, or was it a bad craftsmanship, or it's gonna happen because it's lead and sun and weather?
Could be, yeah, all those things.
Gotcha.
Could be a storm window over it that is, or plexiglass, or plastic storm, what I call them, plastic, that has trapped the heat between that storm and the window. And it creates, you could fry an egg on some of these windows sometimes. So there's no venting. You've got to have vents and a secondary glazing if you put storm windows on. And I can kind of guide you to where to get those vents too. But I really do want to pass out zinc, because I think a couple people asked me about zinc. Those are zinc profiles, so you can get an idea of how. And then I'll pass out a couple pieces of lead, and I'll also pass out rebar, because we didn't talk about that. You have to structurally rebar your windows too. So here are a couple pieces of rebar and then lead, and you can physically move this if you want, so you can kind of see that material. And then now I lost my real quick, let me show you the process real fast, and then if you have any other questions. This is an example of something I'm encountering right now. This is a close-up of just one of the church windows I'm working on in a building. Somebody, and they don't know, they don't have records of who repaired these windows before, used a cement-based product instead of the putty, and they didn't take it off of the glass. So you can see parts of this that are completely covered with it. And when we squirt it with water, it's like you're out on the concrete. And it's not fun. It hasn't been fun to repair. But I'm working on those right now. So I do a lot of repairs. And I kind of think of myself as a surgeon because I'm going in and I might go in, I perform surgery in just one spot. This particular window was blown out by a storm. But the reason why it was blown out is because there was no putty under the glass. So the glass was rattling and the wind took it and just went, and the whole thing blew out. And then if you're familiar with meeting rails, look at how curved that one is. I mean, I tried to stand, but it was so curved, the meeting rail. These double hung sashes are 5 foot wide by 6 foot high, and it's a double hung window, and the church has multiples. And so this is what happened, and then they duct taped it too, which took me a while to take all that off. But the sash had to be restored. This is as I am puttying it, or after I've puttied it, and I had to prop it up because it was so big. And you can see I replaced all the glass, I think, pretty darn good. I had nightmares on this one. And there it is I have a big cart. It's like a drywall cart almost, and I have to, because I can't physically carry some of these by myself. So I cart them, and that was going out. She was going home. I was like, you're going home now. Be good. Well, you can see the window underneath it. They've got blue tape now because that one hasn't been done. And I actually said to them, well, I'm doing the top. Let's get the bottom one done too. So now they're raising money for that. But there's the top one, and they're big double hung windows in this church. So. Madison Presbyterian, look at the little pieces of glass here. An example, I walked in the church, this is a very old church, 1850s, and first thing I was told that this was the original glass. So this isn't the original glass. This is arts and crafts style. This is not the original glass. We come to find out, and I said, at the date of this church, this was probably just divided lights, clear glass, and it was. We found out. Because working on the windows, you could see where they plugged in. Every wood plugs where the muntins were. So, and found out this was like the 4th rendition of glass that had gone through. So these were done in like 1916, somewhere around there. This was a 2-year-long project for me, 2.5-year-long project, because I did it all in situ on a scaffold. So we would go from window to window, clean on the inside, remove the brittle putty with all my dental tools by hand, and re-putty every single piece of glass. Clean it again, take the scaffold down, move to the next window. I did the interior, it took me a year and a half to do that, and then I did the exterior. But there's your storm window that's put up there, 1970s. They were crazed plastic storms. The grill work didn't match the meeting rails of the window, and it destroyed all the paint and chipping paint on the surrounds. So a lot of times it ends up being a bigger project than what they intended, because if I go in and I say, I'm going to be doing all this to the glass, you need to attend to the surrounds too, and maybe the window sash is rotten. And then maybe you need new storm windows, if you want new storm windows. This church, I convinced them not to put storm windows on. The windows are way up in the air. There's no need for, there was never need for storms in the first place. They were made to be outside, but because of the energy crisis and things like that, we've stormed things. But, and this is what I encountered on that church. This is the church there. Same thing. In the previous repairs from the 70s, they schmoozed on the putty and then they didn't wipe it off, or they didn't take it down. We have skewers, and we skewer all that down to the lead. It's supposed to be under the lead, not proud onto the glass. And so all of this had to be chipped. And then there was a lot of little blowouts too that I did repair. And I can do that with my 2-point epoxy, my glass conservers glue. And then this is what So, and you can see my scaffold up there, when I was scaffold up there on the outside. This is another church again, and I don't just do churches, but this gives you a good example. Again, they had storm windows on here that didn't have vents. So,
So.
gotta go.
We're way past time, but we want to
Yep.
thank Rhonda Deeg and RLD Glass and Studio for being a sponsor for the event. So thank you so much, Rhonda.
Okay. Come up and ask questions if you want, or look at things if you want before you go. Thanks for having me.